Saruman, failing to get possession of the ring, would, in the confusion and treacheries of the time, have found in Mordor the missing links in his own researches into ring lore, and before long, he would have made a great ring of his own, with which to challenge the self-styled ruler of Middle-earth. Hey everyone, Yoiston here, and I hope you all are doing well, wherever you are in Middle-earth. Today we are going to be taking a look at Saruman's plan during The Lord of the Rings, for though he had quite a lot of ambition, and a few tricks up his sleeve, he utterly failed in nearly every part of his plan. We did take a look at Gandalf's plan in The Lord of the Rings a few weeks ago, so I figured this would be an interesting parallel. Links to related articles and videos shall be in the description and cards, my friends. Thank you all so much for joining me today. Let's begin our tale. We'll start back before Saruman betrayed the Free Peoples. Though Gandalf had certainly been suspicious of Saruman, at least to some internal degree, long before Saruman had indeed betrayed them, Gandalf did not know the extent of Saruman's ambitions. In the White Council meeting of 2851 of the Third Age, Saruman and Gandalf argued, and Gandalf smoked out many rings of smoke into the air before grasping them in his hand. Saruman had long pondered the meaning of this afterwards, and potentially, it meant that Gandalf had some sneaking suspicion of Saruman's desire to possess the ring, as Gandalf kept grasping at the rings of smoke. Yet, as we come to find, Gandalf really did not know for certain until Saruman's betrayal. All the same, Saruman did at the time wish to get the One Ring for himself. Still being officially aligned with the Free Peoples and against Sauron, but secretly undermining his allies, Saruman wished to delay the White Council's assault on Dol Guldur so that the ring would reveal itself beforehand. Likely during his time, even before settling in Isengard, Saruman learned of Isildur's possession of the ring and his end, so he knew the Gladden Fields was a likely place for the One Ring to be. And so, during the year of that council meeting, Saruman put a watch on the Gladden Fields, allowing for Sauron to bide his time and grow in strength while the White Wizard's search for the ring occurred. Saruman, even behind the council's back, would be unafraid to use his Palantir, the Orthanc Stone, and it's likely that any sort of spying and searching he could do with the stone, he did do. If not for Smeagol having taken the ring from Deagol, who had found it some centuries before, near the Gladden Fields, it is very, very likely that Saruman would have actually found it, as we do know from some of the extended lore of the Unfinished Tales that Saruman found and recovered what remained of Isildur. If not for the fate of Arda being as it was, Saruman almost certainly would have found and taken the One Ring for himself. Yet this was not so, and eventually in 2939, Saruman discovered that Sauron's servants were also searching the Gladden Fields for the same reason, and only then, 2 years later, Saruman agreed to an attack on Dol Guldur as his plot became too risky. Yet the ousting of Sauron from Dol Guldur would contribute a challenge to Saruman's plans and fall, for afterwards, Sauron would return to Mordor, his home of the Second Age, and he would rebuild there. He would also begin looking through the Ethiel Stone taken from Minas Morgul, and so Saruman and Sauron began to communicate. The degree to which Saruman fell under Sauron's dominion is debatable, but the Dark Lord certainly had some effect on the White Wizard, likely hastening Saruman towards openly opposing and moving against the West, to take up a new title, the Wizard of Many Colors, to fortify Isengard against the West, build armies of Uruk-hai, and even create his own petty ring of power. I think Sauron offered Saruman a bit of assurance when it came to such things, and made him do it more hastily. In the last decades of the Third Age, all of these things happened, and it's perhaps through the will of Sauron that some of this happened as it did and when it did. For if Saruman had not been so steadfast in revealing his treachery by capturing Gandalf in 3018 of the Third Age, Saruman might have actually been able to capture the ring rather easily, luring Gandalf and the Fellowship of the Ring through the Gap of Rohan as the safest route for the Fellowship to take. Yet, Saruman did not, trusting in his own hubris, the strength of his warfare, and his ability to read and persuade others, and he overestimated these abilities, of course, revealing himself too early, deciding that it was best to manipulate Radagast to get Gandalf to come to him at Isengard, capture Gandalf until he could learn of the location of the Ring-Bearer, and find some way to capture the ring as well. Perhaps Saruman had even hoped to turn Gandalf to his cause, again, trusting in his hubris rather than Gandalf's loyalty. Yet even if Sauron and Saruman both used each other to mutual benefit, they also knew the limitations of their alliance and the falsehood of it. For Saruman and the Nazgul actually already had a bit of a rivalry based on their meeting at Isengard. Of course, Saruman could not have known that Gwaihir, on flight at the behest of Radagast at the request of Gandalf, who told the Brown Wizard to ask his friends of nature to aid in their objectives, would come and save the Grey Wizard from atop the Tower Orthanc. Yet, Saruman should have known that even if he had discovered all Gandalf knew about the ring, he himself would not have gotten to Frodo first, the Nazgul would have. Therefore, we see that Saruman indeed acted too early, even in his earliest ambitions with the War of the Ring and trying to capture the One Ring. If Saruman had actually been a bit more cunning, more trustworthy, and inviting to his friends, it is likely that Gandalf would have told him more about the ring and Frodo, and perhaps would have led the company through the Gap of Rohan, right into Saruman's clutches. Saruman's distrust of the Free Peoples and Sauron both ran deep, and he believed his spying on Gandalf would serve him better over the years before the war than trying to be his friend, and that joining alongside Sauron would give him the position he needed to get the One Ring first, so that then he could betray both the Free Peoples and Sauron, ruling over the world himself in the end. Or he would have enough time to figure out ringcraft for himself and forge for himself a comparable ring to take power with. But this right here actually speaks to a fundamental problem in his plan, in all of his plans, that we will return to after our full analysis. Well, after Gandalf's escape and Saruman had to improvise, he continued to track the Fellowship as much as he could, with Crabine and other servants, sending an attack party of Uruk-hai led by Ugluk towards the Anduin River. Now, in Saruman's plans during the War of the Ring, this is the time that he was closest to taking the ring during all of his strategies. Yet Frodo and Sam escaped thanks to the heroics of the rest of the Fellowship in that hour, and the son of Gondor was slain while two other hobbits, Pippin and Merry, were captured. It was thought, of course, for a time that they did have the ring, and for all Saruman would have known from afar, they probably did. But before they were taken back to Isengard, the party of Uruks were wiped out by the Rohirrim, the people of the Mark who, throughout this time, Saruman had also been weakening and undermining and working against. He saw to the death of Theodred, the capture of Éomer and Rohan after he had slain these Uruk-hai. Yet even this was not enough, for once more, Saruman was subverted by Gandalf, who returned from death and led the Free Peoples in a way that outmatched and outmaneuvered pretty much everything Saruman had done. By this point, all Saruman had left was his giant Uruk-hai army and his fortress. But even these things were dealt with handily by Gandalf and his allies. The Ents, who Saruman alienated, destroyed Isengard while Rohan was reunited, its king healed, and horns from Fangorn joined the men, all to destroy the army at Helm's Deep. After this, Saruman really had almost nothing left, but even in his hubris, he believed that his voice could potentially still turn Rohan to his side or even to his service. Yet Gandalf once more is there to make sure that that doesn't happen. Grima, Saruman's servant, threw the Palantir out of the window, which devastated Saruman, as it led to Pippin looking into it, and then Sauron believing Saruman captured a halfling with the ring, revealing the wizard's double treachery. If the Palantir hadn't been thrown out of the window, perhaps he and Sauron at least could have maintained their alliance. By this point, nearly every single plan of Saruman's had failed. Even his ruffians taking control of the Shire at this point really didn't serve a purpose other than to get revenge against Gandalf, Frodo, and the place and people they held dear, as the ring had long since left the Shire, and there was really nothing of great power there. Sure, Saruman would subvert Gandalf's hope for the Ents to keep him locked in his Tower of Orthanc, but ultimately that would be of little consequence in the end, as Saruman had lost many of his servants, much of his power, and was honestly little more than a brigand himself at that point. Perhaps he could have gone on to find some measure of redemption after Frodo had spared him, but perhaps not, after all the hatred and death and evil he had spread in the Shire and beyond. But now we come to an interesting point of reflection of it all. What was the point of Saruman's plan? What was he trying to achieve? What was his ultimate weakness? Well, as for that first question, Saruman was definitely quite alike to Sauron in many ways, wanting world dominion, believing his power as a Maya, his wisdom and cunning and so forth would be boons for him as the tyrant of Middle-earth, but like Sauron, he would not share that with any other, not even other tyrants. As for the second question, Saruman was certainly trying to achieve possession of the ring, or a comparable ring to slay, conquer, and enslave all those who opposed him. Indeed, perhaps if he had gotten the ring, he could have totally pulled this off. I made a theory on what if Saruman had gotten the ring quite a few years ago, and it definitely ends with the world plunging into darkness, but it's quite possible too that even if Saruman had gotten the ring, he could have still been defeated by the Free Peoples or Sauron's forces, or both. Because, to be fair, Sauron did have the One Ring at the end of the Second Age, and he was still stopped. Now, of course, that was by the likes of Elendil and Gil-galad, of whose kind didn't really walk the world anymore, but potentially he still could have been stopped. As for the third question, we now get back to that fundamental problem in his plan, his greatest weakness. While one could certainly make the argument that it was Gandalf, the unexpected things he did in opposition to Saruman, that really saved the world, particularly during the events of the Two Towers, as without Gandalf, Saruman surely could have destroyed Rohan, the Shire, and caused quite a lot of harm. But he would not have been able to recover the ring, most likely, all the same. It wasn't really Gandalf who stood in Saruman's way. Really would have been Saruman himself. Even if the Free Peoples couldn't have stopped him, Sauron would have, as he would have crushed Saruman for his treachery when he no longer needed him. And that really is Saruman's fundamental issue with all of his plans. He alienated everyone, and had no truer allies than Wormtongue, Dunlendings, and his own Uruk-hai after his treachery. Yes, Wormtongue was likely his truest ally, or servant, and I say that knowing Wormtongue was literally the one to kill Saruman. He offended almost everyone, men, elves, other wizards, hobbits, Sauron's servants, even trees. Sorry, Ents. To me, Saruman's hubris cost him all the power he so desperately craved, because he valued no one else nearly as highly as he valued himself. Even Sauron, to be fair, entrusted tasks to great and powerful servants. Saruman was a far less apt and wise tyrant, less politically manipulative and intelligent than he thought he was. For all of his intelligence, he indeed lacked wisdom and trust in others, and that led his evil to its downfall, very fortunately for the West. And so, we come to the end of our tale on what was Saruman's plan in The Lord of the Rings. From this story, we see that we must keep our egos in check, and remember to surround ourselves with people we trust, those we seek to aid and care for, and those people will, in return, keep us from the depths of our own hubris. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed this Middle-earth Explained video. If you did, please be sure to hit that like button and share this with a friend. What are your thoughts on Saruman's plan? Let me know in the comments below. I enjoyed the additional lore and complexity that Saruman throws into the War of the Ring. If you'd like to support the channel, please consider getting some candles from our friends Mythologie Candles, or order some Weta or United Cutlery Lord of the Rings swords, statues, and other replicas from Castle Kon, who does international shipping, and use the code WEST at checkout. Please check out our merch and Patreon as well. Thanks to our Valor tier patrons and YouTube members: Peter Shepard, Jonathan Putnam, Blair Scott and Merton, John Hume, Sam McBee, Elizabeth Calvert, Maz Gibbs, Reese Jenkins, Adam Petrolik, Anthony Harmon, Arthur, Merlin, Dale Davis, Kingswald Project, Robert Bogue, and King of Games 2500. Thank you so much to all of our patrons and YouTube members. Please subscribe and hit that bell button to join the Men of the West and all of the Free Peoples today. And I'll see you all again next week with a video on the lore of lesser-known lands of Middle-earth, what will perhaps be a part 1 of a multi-part series. My friends, thank you all so much for joining me in this adventure. Until the next one.